So a couple weeks ago I mentioned in a video that Pikmin 2 was the only Pikmin game I really haven't gotten into yet, aside from spin-offs I guess. And I think a lot of this has to do with kind of its mixed reputation. It kind of scared me to approach it because I really liked both Pikmin 1 and Pikmin 3, and it seemed like Pikmin 2 was the game that really split the fan base down the middle. So I'm assuming if you watch this video, you probably know like what Pikmin 2 is for the most part, but just in case I'm gonna get you caught up a little bit, just like really fast, just give you a quick little rundown. So after the whole theme in Pikmin 1 where like the ship crashes and like the ship parts get scattered all over the world, and you had to collect all 30 parts within like a certain amount of time. After that, when they went to make Pikmin 2, they decided to do something a little different. To kind of add into the story a little bit, they made it so that Olimar, the main character, was in debt, and they figured out that little pieces of treasure from the planet that you explored in Pikmin 1 are worth a lot of money. So you go back to that planet and just collect a bunch of treasure, and you try to pay off your debt with that. So I guess they thought in Pikmin 2 it'd be really underwhelming if you had to collect the same amount of treasure that you had to collect ship parts in the first game. So they decided to make it so that there's a lot more treasure in Pikmin 2 than there were ship parts. And they kind of had to find like a happy medium between it being underwhelming and also being overwhelming, because like if they put all those parts in the main overworld, then it would just be like a ton of parts to collect, and that would be really hard to work with from a designer's point of view, I'm sure. And if they didn't want it to feel too cluttered, they would have to like make the world way bigger, which again, that can definitely be really overwhelming. So they came up with this idea where you kind of have this dungeon system in Pikmin 2 where you go underground, and it's kind of structured like a dungeon crawler game where there's like different sub-levels, and like on each sub-level there's a certain amount of enemies, and then like in Pikmin 2 there's the treasure to collect. There's like 2 to 3 pieces of treasure on each floor. And I think this does a really good job of like balancing out this idea so that you can have a lot more to collect, which is like the most fun part of Pikmin, I think, is collecting the things and like getting past the enemies and trying to collect all the treasure. But it sounds like a lot of people see the caves as like kind of tedious actually. And before I even got Pikmin 2, I was trying to decide if I even wanted to play it because of what I had heard. So I started to get really worried that I just wouldn't like Pikmin 2. And I started to imagine like how it definitely could be a bad thing, like if they did it wrong, if they did the caves wrong. Because like I remember in Pikmin 1, one of my least favorite parts of the game was when I was like in a tight spot, like literally like a tight area, a small area, and I had all my Pikmin and I was trying to like juggle all of them without them getting like stuck behind corners and like falling into holes and stuff. And like obviously the caves are going to be pretty like smaller than the overworld, so I was worried about like how that could definitely be a problem. I also heard about how you couldn't make Pikmin in the caves. I'm sure you know this, but like in Pikmin, normally the Pikmin sort of reproduce by like picking up monsters and putting it into their spaceship, and it just kind of makes more Pikmin. And this is very important because Pikmin die a lot, but you just can't do that in the caves. You just can't make more Pikmin when you're down in the caves. So like once you go down there, you have your party of Pikmin. That's all you have for all of the sub-levels. And I also heard about how the caves were randomly generated, so like every time you go down into the caves, they're gonna look different. So those two things kind of combined seem like a bad thing, you know? And I can definitely see how that would be really tedious, like to have to go down every time and like be extremely careful about every step that you take, you know? I also heard about people commenting on the music being kind of annoying, which would definitely be a big problem on top of you being down in the caves for a long time. And if the caves already feel tedious, then the music being annoying just completely And another thing would be, since like the caves are randomly generated, you know, they can't masterfully craft the caves like they do the overworld. So people talked about how the caves look a lot more bare bones than the rest of the game, and the caves are at least like half of the gameplay. So but yeah, the music and the not very interesting visuals together would just kind of break the atmosphere, you'd think. And then on top of all this, when you go down into the cave, if you miss treasure or like you don't have the right Pikmin with you to get the treasure, that means you'll have to come back after you complete the cave and then go through all the sub-levels that you've already completed again until you get to the sub-level with treasure. So I'm sure you can see how I was just really worried about how this game just wouldn't stay consistently fun like how Pikmin 1 and 3 were. But after really taking the time to play the game for myself, I can say that none of these problems actually are problems at all. I mean, these are all things that kind of exist in the game, but all of these seemingly problems have solutions with them. As for me being really worried about the tight spaces and having all your Pikmin down in the caves, trying to keep up with all of them, every time you go down to a new level in the caves, there's like this big open area where you're not even close to enemies, and it gives you plenty of space to like sort out your Pikmin and like sort their colors and like figure out which ones you need to bring with you, you know? As for not being able to make the Pikmin in the caves, this more than anything just doesn't even seem to be a problem at all. In the hardest cave caves that I've played so far, the most Pikmin I've lost is actually just like 20. So I end up leaving the cave with like 80 Pikmin. Now I'm only halfway through the game, so it could get harder from here. And when I say halfway through the game, I mean like 50% of my debt is completed. Apparently there's like a lot of after game after you beat the game, so I'm probably not even halfway through. But based on what I've seen so far, I'm really convinced that none of these things will actually become a problem. And I'm finding that the randomized caves as well, that's just like not even a problem at all either. If anything, it just makes the game more interesting. In fact, I'm not even sure why I was worried about that in the first place. And for the music, I have no idea what people were talking about with it being annoying. Okay, so when I heard people saying that the music was annoying, I kind of imagined like there was like a 2-minute song loop that would play and just repeat and repeat and repeat. And like you can definitely see how that would be really annoying if like you're down in the caves for like 30 minutes, because that's not an abnormal thing in Pikmin 2. Like you're gonna be in the caves for a while probably. But if I'm being completely honest, the music almost reminds me of like Animal Crossing music. It's the same sort of thing where it's kind of like slow paced and like, I don't want to say it's an ambiance. It's definitely not an ambiance, but I could listen to the music for like an hour and just like not get irritated by it, like if I was focused on the caves, you know. But another thing in the music's favor is like you're not going to listen to it for an hour. Even in the longest caves, each level has its own music. So if you're on a level for like 10 minutes, you go down into the next level, the music's gonna be different. And for the visuals, the caves definitely don't look boring at all or bare bones. They're extremely weird. Kind of expected them all to just be kind of boring caves and rocks, you know? But you go down there and like you're in a bathroom or like a child's bedroom or like a big grassy field with like flowers everywhere. It doesn't even make sense, but it's fun to look at. So atmosphere wise, the caves are really interesting, and to my surprise, I do not get bored of them at all. Like I actually really look forward to going down into the caves after I've explored the overworld a little bit. Now the only thing I could really see being a problem for some people is just like how long the caves are and how many levels there are. Like last night I played a cave that was like 7 sub-levels long. I had to have been playing that cave for like 45 minutes because I was trying to collect everything while I was down there to try to prevent me from having to backtrack. But this definitely isn't a problem either, because as you go through the caves, like every time you go down to the next level, the game saves, so it'll remember like what treasure you got on the previous floors, and you can just leave the caves at any time. So like when you go down into the caves, there's no commitment whatsoever. And as for backtracking, most of the time when you go down into the cave, you can just kind of leave your Pikmin at the entrance and run on over, run past the enemies, run to the end of the cave. And when you go into the next hole to go down to the next sub-level, the Pikmin will still come with you anyway. So you don't actually have to fight any of the enemies on the levels that you've already been through. So if you ask me, the caves really just like aren't even tedious at all. They're really forgiving and easygoing like the rest of the game. And something that adds to that too is just like there's not even a timer when you're down in the caves. So you can really take your time like exploring them and knocking out all the enemies trying to get to the treasure. And it's always so satisfying to get back to the surface and see that you've collected like 15, 20 pieces of treasure, because that's far more than you're gonna find on the overworld. Now I can definitely see why somebody wouldn't be super into this game, I guess. I mean, it's pretty slow at times, and I can see why it would be a little overwhelming sometimes when you go down into the caves and there's like a lot of enemies to defeat. But this game still keeps the strange balance that Pikmin 1 hit, where it's like a little bit stressful, but it's also really easygoing at the same time. And I think it's genius how they changed things up in Pikmin 2 to really keep things fresh. And I like the way that all Pikmin 1, 2, and 3 are very different from each other. And I really look forward to seeing what they're going to do for Pikmin 4, because there's no doubt in my mind it's definitely going to be a lot different from the other 3. Anyway, that's going to be it for this video.